So the question is, do we hyper target or do we send out broader messages to more people? I think there's a happy medium there that has to be found. And now this whole generation of digital marketers, we're going to get to explore that because we're going to be forced into it.
Jeff Greenfield, welcome to Growth Game. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, pleasure's all ours, absolutely. So I think to start off with, it'd be great if you could just give us sort of a back to front of your kind of journey as an entrepreneur and how you came to be where you are and, an expert in sort of attribution.
Yeah, absolutely. My background is on more on the brand side, the marketing side. And then in the mid 2000s, I had a client that was facing this problem of trying to figure out what was working and what wasn't working. And they were doing a lot of CPA deals at the time. And so every sale that would come in, they would end up having, five mothers or five fathers. Everybody's trying to claim credit for that conversion. And so originally, that's where I built this solution, C3 Metrics, to be able to figure out what was working and what wasn't working. And scaled that company. It primarily focused on enterprise clients, ones that are spending, north of 10 or $20 million or so per year, primarily in digital. And then I exited there in 2019. So had that for about 12 years. And then I decided I've done everything there is to do a measurement. I'm never going back. And I was trying to figure out what my next journey was going to be. And then all of a sudden, it's like the bottom collapsed out of things, because C3 Metrics was built on the concept that there's these cookies that connect the dots and everything. And now all of a sudden, the world shifts. iOS makes all these privacy changes. There's all this litigation and regulations that are going on. And then Chrome is going to get rid of cookies. And I'm like, oh my God, this great system that I built that has helped all these big advertisers is going to stop working. And what is their solution? And then at the same time, all of a sudden overnight, GA comes along and says, hey, we're switching out from GA to GA4, but you have to update your code. I mean, this is the strangest thing. GA has gone through multiple updates, but now we had to update our code. So I'm like, this is an interesting disruption that's all happening at the same time in the measurement space. So I saw an opportunity and I said, I'm going to jump back in and create a new company called Probalytics, which does the same thing that C3 does, but it does it without user level data. It leverages the power of machine learning and AI to get to the answers that marketers need to figure out what's working and what's not working.
Was that kind of like an obvious solution you kind of had in your head? Because that's, I guess, kind of like developing your original idea. Like, what was the journey? Because that just didn't like come out of nowhere, did it? That wasn't like divine inspiration. Where did it come from?
No, because, in the beginning, it was about the solution to this back in 2008 when I built C3 was about, hey, there's all this big data. Let's collect it all. And so essentially it was very cool. We would have tags when a client would go live. They'd obviously put tags on their website so we could collect all the click data. And then if they were live in Facebook, we would send Facebook tags. So if you were going in your newsfeed and our client's ads show up, we would get a ping that a certain ID saw this ad. And New York Times would take tags. There were tags everywhere. There's even tags up on YouTube. So we had this entire user journey all the way through. And so it wasn't that difficult. There was a lot of big data, but the math involved wasn't that difficult to figure out what was working and what wasn't working.
Yeah, it was almost too easy, no?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a lot of scaling issues because you're collecting now billions upon billions of impressions each day. And we built this out right at the beginning of AWS, and we weren't on AWS. We had to build out our own kind of private cloud and scale it. So that had a lot of complications involved. But I always thought that as I saw AWS grow up and I saw that the cost of cycles of running computers started to decrease and it's continued to decline, I thought, maybe there's the ability to use some more advanced mathematics to be able to get to the same answers. That was always the philosophy. But when I would test things previously, what would end up happening is that by the time we would get to what the answer was, it had taken so much time. No one would be interested in that answer because it would just take too many cycles and too many CPUs in order to get there. But I knew eventually we would get to a point where things would start to catch up. And now we're at this point where it doesn't really matter because we're not going to have that data anymore. The data is not going to be available. And what I was fascinated by and where the idea came from, Chris, is that multi-touch attribution, which is what C3 was this user level thing. Everybody loved it because it was always on, always running. But what it didn't have is this core component called incrementality. So it told you it gave you the value, but what it didn't tell you is what was the incremental impact of each of the touch points or each of the partners you're with. And incrementality is the big thing now. And essentially the gold standard is you do like A/B testing. But then I started to look around the landscape, and there's been a marketing technique, a measurement technique that's been out there for years called marketing mix modeling. And the basis of marketing mix modeling is called contribution, meaning what is the contribution that this channel or this tactic is making to the overall mix, which is essentially the same as incrementality. It's the same concept. The only difference is incrementality, you're actually doing an A/B test and it's deterministic. Marketing mix modeling is probabilistic, but we're now moving into this new era because of all these changes where we're going to have to live in a world of probabilistic modeling. But the greatest thing is that it still gets us to that 80-90% mark, which is where we need to be for marketing.
Okay, so
probably what's there?
no, there's a lot to unpack. So
Yeah.
sorry, could you break probabilistic modeling down for me a little bit more? Because I think
Yeah.
I'm following you, but talk to me. Yeah.
Let's use an example of something that we would call days to conversion. Our
Okay.
clients were always fascinated to know that if a customer starts and their first impact with our brand is on display, how long do the people who start on display take to convert? And if somebody starts on Google or Facebook, how long do they take to convert? Now, the reason, and I'll get to your answer in a second, the reason this number is important is because there's only so many days left to the quarter, like let's say 3 weeks.
Okay.
And my boss says, hey, we need to get more sales in. Well, if display is taking 45 days to bring new people in, I shouldn't put more money in display. I should put it in things that are more lower funnel where people who start with it will convert in a shorter period of time. So in the world of C3, where we collected all of this data, I would make a query in my database. It would say, show me everyone from the last 2 months whose first impression was display. Now tell me how long did it take for their journey to go and give me the average and the median of those numbers. That's deterministic. That's absolute. It's real numbers. In the world that we live in now, I don't know what someone's first impression was and their first click. It may even be wrong with all the iOS changes. So we have to use models in order to get there. Similar to a great example of a probabilistic model, this may be a bad example, is the weather. They use modeling to report on the weather. They use models to predict how hurricanes are going to move in their path and stuff like that. And they use models for all of the AI stuff that's going on. That's what's driving all of this stuff these days. So we're surrounded by all of these probabilistic models, but in marketing, we got addicted to data. We believed, and it's actually been a false narrative for us. We believed as marketers that the more data we had, the better that we could actually go in and target it. Meaning if we got hyper targeted with everyone, we could actually sell more stuff. And what ended up happening is that that's a false narrative because the more we target, the lower down in the funnel we get. And we tend as marketers, we forget about the biggest number. The most important number in marketing is reach. And then when we're hyper targeted, we're actually reaching fewer customers, which means our funnel is not as full as it used to be, which means marketing has to work even harder and our ROI tends to go down. That's why you're starting to see now these bigger brands that are spending more money in branding than they are in direct response. They've moved money to the upper part of the funnel. And that's one of the trends that we're going to start to see happen.
Do you mean it's better to understand the user journey than getting data? When you talk about modeling, I guess it's not based on data and numbers. It's more about the user journey and the way people are buying stuff. So is that what you are recreating through AI?
Well, with AI, we're not recreating the user journey because we don't have every component of the user journey. What we're doing with AI and machine learning is that we're looking at the relationships between what are the impressions that we have in market, what's out there in terms of messaging on a daily basis, and what is the impact. So let's think about, for example, a typical e-commerce client. Most people tend to think that the job of advertising today is to sell stuff or generate leads or to get our conversions. But the reality is that's not the case. The job of marketing is to get people to our website where they can then engage with the brand further and eventually buy stuff or do some action that we want. And so what we're looking at is we're looking at first the relationship between all of the impressions that are in market and the visitors that come to the website. Now, another interesting thing as well is that when people look at the different types of marketing, there's always one that everyone sees inside their Google Analytics, which is a huge one called brand search. Most brands, you type in the brand name and they have to bid on their own terms so their competitors don't come in and conquest them. Well, all executives, they look at brand search and they're like, wow, our ROI on brand search is incredible. We should double down on brand search. We should spend 3 times the amount of money. And I used to always tell clients that if you spend $1 million more next month on brand search, you wouldn't have any more sales because brand search is driven by the messages that you have in market. The only people who can search for your brand are people who already know about you. Where you want to spend your dollars is to find out how do they get to know about you. And we're able to actually determine what is actually driving brand search. What percentage of brand search is coming from Facebook? What percentage is coming from display advertising? What percentage is coming from podcast advertising as well? And podcasts are fascinating because there's nothing to click on a podcast. People just hear a message. So how do you measure that in GA? How do you measure CTV in GA? So there's all these new channels, which we're calling no-click digital channels, that there's no way to measure them accurately.
It sounds like to me, you almost think it's like quite a positive thing that this shift has happened with the cookie collapse because people were focusing on the wrong thing because they had the numbers. It's like when people get like a smartwatch for their exercise and they let it consume their lives and they start focusing on like, oh, my HRV's not there. I can't do this today. And they kind of tank themselves. Would that be accurate?
No, you're 100% accurate, Chris. You know, we have a whole generation of marketers who spent their whole career in digital, and they don't understand that before digital marketing, so let's say pre-2006, brands used to sit around with their marketing agency and they would come up with a concept. They would sit down and they would get very creative. They would say, our customer her name is Julie. She's 24 years old. She lives in New York City. She has a cat. And then our
Yeah,
other
personal.
customer,
Yeah.
yeah, they would create personas and then they would start creating unique messages for them. And then they would go out and they would buy TV for one persona based upon the types of shows that the research showed those people like. They would buy ads in magazines. They would do out of home. And then they would do this strange thing that most digital marketers don't know how to do. They would sit back and they would wait. They would sit on their hands and they would wait for this campaign to go in. And then after 3 or 4 months, they would do an awareness study. They would do aided and unaided awareness to see how many people now knew about their brand that didn't know it before, and so on and so forth. And that's how they would evaluate. But most marketers today in digital marketing, they think you put out an ad today, you get sales today or tomorrow. They don't understand this concept of ad stock, that sometimes someone needs to see an ad 5 or 6 times, and that ads have this kind of lagged impact over time. So this is a good thing. It's going to be painful for most digital marketers, but as they step back, and I always call it this concept of panning back the camera. We've had our head so deep in this data pipe that we actually can't see the big picture.
It's taken us back to the Mad Men, Don Draper coming up with a clever idea and wearing a snappy suit kind of vibe. That's what you're like. Why people get into marketing and creative stuff, really?
Exactly. And what I would say on this last point is, don't believe me. One of the best books in marketing that's available today is called Lemon: How the Advertising Brain Turned Sour by Orlando Wood. It's about $60 on Amazon. Every marketer should read this. Most don't buy it, which means if you go out and you get it and you read it and you understand it, you will be light years ahead of anyone that's out there. It's from the IPA in the UK. And the reason it's so expensive is because there's all these color photos in here. It's only
Ah,
five, it's only 5 chapters. And then discuss it with someone who's not in the industry. The concepts in here are universal, but it is absolutely phenomenal because they have actually measured and they demonstrate a decrease in ad effectiveness since marketers have been hyper focused on data. And listen, I feel bad because I drove part of that by building out this huge attribution system that was all data based. I was part of the problem. So now I'm trying to be part of the solution here, which is you can actually make better decisions. Here's an interesting tidbit that most people don't know. Okay, there is incredible research that's been around for a number of years by a good friend of mine, Bill Harvey. Bill Harvey did research where he can take large brands like these CPG brands. He can look at their TV schedule of ads that they've bought. He does an analysis on each of their TV ads to determine what the emotional state of that TV ad is. And then he looks at all of the available TV programs that they can buy, and he finds TV programs that are a similar emotional state. And just by buying those spots, they see sales go up 15, 20%. Now, why is that? It's because most digital marketers today forget there is an emotional component to somebody being, you know, engaging with the brand. And if you take certain ads and put them in a program that is a similar emotional state, your sales will go up. I think it's been proven for years that soda companies, when they advertise in dramatic shows, their sales actually go down. Soda companies do very well in comedies. But as digital marketers, we've been taught this whole generation that the answer is in the data. All we need to do is target more and more and get closer and closer. But every time we add a level of targeting, it increases our expenses. And the CFOs, they hate that because then we may not have positive ROI. So the question is, do we hyper target or do we send out broader messages to more people? I think there's a happy medium there that has to be found. And that's and now this whole generation of digital marketers, we're going to get to explore that because we're going to be forced into it.
that's really interesting. I hadn't even thought about it like that. I think you're talking about what marketing used to be, what it became, and what it's moving on to now. That passage of time in business is as good a segue as you're going to give me into one of our first little quick fire quizzes. So I just want to
Okay.
pick your brain a bit. So the game is called Schrodinger's Startup. And
Okay.
it sounds clever on the surface. Don't think too hard about it because it falls apart under
Okay.
scrutiny. But I want you to imagine your 18-year-old self time traveling to the present day, but carrying all of the business knowledge that you've acquired over your career. So
Okay.
first question, your 18-year-old self has $5,000 in capital and 3 months to make something happen. What industry do you specialize in and why?
First off, I would go local.
Okay.
That'd be number one, because local is what really drives most of the economy. Most people don't know that 95% of all of the advertising revenue in Facebook is local. It comes from local florists, restaurants, massage therapists. So I would go local, and I think there's an opportunity in restaurants.
Really?
Um, yeah, I do because I think that restaurants are getting more and more with their POS systems. They're getting more and more sophisticated, but I still have not seen restaurants do a really good job of communicating back and forth. They send out really bad newsletters. Most restaurants haven't caught on to the idea that, hey, SMS is the way to go. I think they're about 3 or 4 years behind. So I would focus on bars and restaurants and come up with some sort of SMS system. I would hack something together with like one of the SMS, things and create some sort of way for them to opt
Yeah.
into sort of list for like a discount or something. That's what I would do. And just try to go in and
Yeah.
go
Some
door to door.
marketing automation. Yeah.
Yeah, and go door to door to local bars. You could probably hit 10 or 15 places a night, maybe sign up people for a free trial and sign them up for a really inexpensive, too good to pass up deal. That's
Have
what I would do.
Have you got a name for your restaurant in mind, Jeff?
Um, a name for the
Yeah.
the thing.
No, it would be more like a system for restaurants, I guess, what you mean. It's not you
Yeah.
creating a restaurant. That would be
Oh,
you
I
creating like marketing
Yeah.
automation for more engagement for
A
restaurants.
name.
I just
Yeah. That.
because for example, I always thought I would open a restaurant called Darwin's, and the gimmick would be the menu as a word search, so only like the smart people that figure it out get to eat. Survival of the fittest. Just
I love that.
yeah.
That's
So question 2.
okay.
Where do you see the biggest opportunities today compared to when you started? How has the game of business changed? You may have answered that in question 1, so feel free to refer us to one if you like.
I'm in my late 50s, and a lot of my friends feel like that time that things are moving real fast. The technology is constantly moving. But lately I've been feeling like things are slowing down because I'm seeing these trends. I'm seeing some of the same things that happened 15, 20 years ago are starting to reoccur. But one of the best ways for me, and this isn't really answering the question, but I think people will find it fascinating. One of the things that I try to do every week is I try to teach myself something new, whether it's like try to do like a coding experiment, create some sort of project, or try to learn a new skill. Uh, I'm always challenging myself to try to keep up and try to expand my mind because that opens me up to more possibilities. But going back to the original question, I think the best opportunity today is in local, and I think that's worldwide. I really do. If someone's looking to start a business and build a business, that's also going to have the biggest impact. I think is local is the way to go because there's, all of the problems that we have locally, those problems are nationwide. And let's not forget, Facebook started as a solution on one college campus, and then they added on individual colleges one at a time. I'll never forget the sales guy, the main sales guy there, Kevin Colleran. I knew him from before. He reached out to me, see if I had any clients that were interested. And he was telling me about this thing, the Facebook. And I said, well, how can I see it? And he said, well, he says, all you need to do is log in with your .edu email address. And I said, Kevin, when I went to college, there was an email. And he's like, I can't get you in then. I'll just send you some screenshots. And that was it. But Facebook started locally on a single college campus and then expanded from there. So let's not forget that,
but the model was scalable, but depending on what you do for restaurants, or because that's the issue with local businesses most of the time, like when you try to do something local, it's hard to scale.
Right. It is.
Yeah.
But I think it could be done.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Everything can be done. Everything
That's
is
right.
possible.
So again, I've got one more question in this one. You may well have already answered it, so by all means, refer to the above. Do you think this fictional venture is likely to outperform your actual business with the head start you have in terms of business experience? Is business really more competitive than it used to be?
I don't think business is more competitive than it used to be. And I think that, what's interesting is that with your scenario where my 18-year-old self has all my business knowledge, but my 18-year-old self doesn't have my life skills or my life knowledge because my 18-year-old self runs myself into the ground and works 24/7 and nearly kills myself for business. Whereas the late 50s version of myself um, tends to focus more on being a healthier version, eating better, exercising every day, making sure I get enough sleep, taking time to myself, reading, even though Lemon is a great book, taking time to read other things every day that have nothing to do with business and trying to be more well-rounded. So I'm going to say that if my 18-year-old self would come to the future with all of the business knowledge and all of the life skills, then yes, it would be it would be better off.
Truly embodying the name of the game, which is Schrodinger's startup. Thank you for your indulgence.
Oh my goodness, what?
No, really, really good answers there. You really kind of shaved against the grain with that. That was really interesting. Thank you.
Right.
So we'll move on now, I guess, to the main topic, what the podcast's about, which is the cookie collapse. So it feels like they've kind of been the backbone of the internet for a while. So like, why are third party cookies like getting the chop? Like, what's the actual cause of this?
Well, the actual cause of this is that anytime you have an unregulated market where there's opportunities to grow and no one is watching what's going on, companies are going to say, hey, this is a huge opportunity. This is a place for me to build a huge business. And they're just going to go in and gobble up as much opportunities as they have. And what I'm talking about is just the overall data in the ad business. It's not regulated. And so in the early days, just so we can back up, there's two main types of cookies, first party and third party. First party are the ones that if you go to Amazon.com or Amazon.co.uk, they're writing a cookie for Amazon and they can read and write those cookies. And those cookies allow you, when you go there, you're automatically logged in. Third party cookies are the ones when you're on NewYorkTimes.com or any other site where all those ad trackers are there and all the ads, so that an ad system knows that you were on the New York Times. And if you go to another place, they can show you another ad because they knew right where you were. And the problem is that once a company has your data and they know where you're at, they can put you into segments and then they can sell that data. And it's been well documented that you go to one website, there may only be 3 ads there, but that data gets passed on to 3 to 4 to 500 different data brokers. And that's just a system that just has gone on without any regulation, nothing going on. So the first thing that happened was GDPR. GDPR came in and said, hey, new rules, everyone. Now, if you've built up these data pools that you have of people, those data pools are all gone. You now can rebuild that data pool, but you have to have people opt in. And that's why a lot of businesses, when GDPR came out, a lot of US based businesses that were in the EU, they left. These cross device companies that could track, they just said, hey, we built this data. That's our value. To start from ground zero, forget about it. We're gone. And then over in the US, then they started with the CCPA, the one in California. Now there's laws in about a dozen different states. And now in the US, the idea is it's a light version of GDPR, which is you don't have to get people to opt in, but they have the opportunity to opt out.
It should have been like this from the start, but because they just took everything without asking. So
That's exactly right. And there was no regulation. And then the other thing that's happened is that now we have these walled gardens and we've never had them at the level we've had now. And so you've got like Walmart, for example, Walmart.com, and they realize, hey, there's value to our data. Target.com, same thing. All of the Disney companies. And Google is saying, well, wait a second, we're kind of a walled garden too. So by us getting rid of third-party cookies, which makes the regulators and the privacy folks happy, it also secures all of the data that we have as well. And so that's a win for them, not a win for the marketers, but I think in the long term, a win for the brands. So that's kind of where this all came about. Now, Google was supposed to do this last year. People started freaking out because essentially it's going to make major changes to the way the ad business operates. So they put it off for another year. Meanwhile, what's happened is iOS has come and further clamped down on things. With this iOS 17 update that's just come out, they're going to be stripping some of the tracking parameters. So they're even getting tighter and tighter over at iOS. But when this happens, it's going to be, sometime in 2024, it's going to be a lot of devastation for the ad industry. You're not going to be able to track people across the different websites. You'll know when they came to your website, but you won't know how they got there necessarily.
You talked earlier about how in some ways this is going to be a lot better for marketers because they can get back to like old school kind of creativity. But I just wonder from what you've seen so far, are they going to be like, it's called like the cookie collapse, or I've seen it called the Cookiepocalypse. Is it that dramatic a deal, or is it a bit of Y2K all over again? Like are there going to be big winners and losers in this, or will it kind of all kind of chill, do you think?
Well, I kind of feel like I'm Chicken Little because I've been screaming this for like the last, since they announced this, I've been screaming, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. And what I hear from a lot of brands is, well, it hasn't happened yet. And who knows? They changed their mind once, they put it off for a year. So maybe they're not going away. And so I think the first reaction is going to be that when they pull third-party cookies away, when it does happen next year, brands are going to say, we need to find a cookie-less solution, meaning there's ways to track people across different websites that don't involve cookies. I created a cookie-less identifier at C3 Metrics, and there's a lot of them that are out there. But remember, when we talked about why this is happening because of privacy. This is happening because they want to create a walled garden for themselves. So once they get rid of third-party cookies, what do you think they're going to do to the cookie-less tracking technology? They're going to start clamping down on those. They're going to start going away. You're going to see a lot of updates to Chrome to get rid of them. And so things like browser fingerprinting, which has been around for a long time, there's a lot of work out there with e-tags and other things like that. They're going to be stopping that. It's now going to be the way that things are. Then people are going to try to do other ways, but there are going to be big losers and there's going to be big winners in this. The biggest winners in this are going to be the biggest players, the folks that have their own walled gardens, Meta, Google, Target, Walmart. The losers initially are going to be the advertisers, because now what's going to happen is I can get great performance out of Facebook. I can get great performance out of Google. I can get great performance out of Target. I can get great performance out of Amazon. Trying to get those folks to talk to each other, that's not going to happen. Trying for me as the marketer to figure out what's working and what's not working without something like a Probalytics.
It's going to be, so it's a seismic shift, in other words.
It's a major seismic shift. It is. I mean, a lot of marketers are starting to understand it because, like, for example, you can't get Amazon data to talk to your like Facebook data. But people are starting to realize that when you advertise on Amazon and you have a Shopify store, that there's a halo impact, meaning that a lot of people will go to Amazon, they'll see you're an ad. They've never heard about your brand before. They'll go to the page and they'll say, I wonder if they have a Shopify store. And they'll type into Google the name of the brand. They'll go there. So as you advertise more on Amazon, you'll start to notice that your brand search will start to go up and your organic traffic will go up. And likewise, some people will be on your Shopify store and they'll say, hey, I wonder if I could just order on Amazon, and they'll go to Amazon. So these are some of the things that as you start to scale, in the beginning, it's great, but eventually you get to the point where your cost to acquisition starts to go up, your ROI starts to go down, and you start to say, hey, I need to try to figure this out. And just doing regular math in a spreadsheet, it's not going to work for understand.
So that's why it will be back to classic marketing, where brand awareness and the proper communication, proper marketing will be much better than just like, as you said, working on a spreadsheet. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. And just a couple of years ago, like 5-6 years ago, people were predicting that this, the old school market research where they would do surveys for people were predicting, that's so old school. That's all going away. That's never going to come back. But the reality is that the World Federation of Advertisers met with some of the largest brands in the world. And the biggest issue that they've always had is that, hey, when I buy ads across 25 countries, it's a nightmare for me as a CMO to figure out just even on a single platform to try to get uniformity. So they're now working on building out a system based upon market research. So market research, these old school things, just like you talked about, Damien, those are on their way back. And marketers need to understand how to play in that world.
I don't know how much you know about our business, Jeff, but we're a gamification platform. Have you used gamification at all when you've been sort of looking at like attribution methods and stuff? And how do you think gamification is going to play in this kind of like new arena? Because I feel like it looks pretty good for
Because gamification is all about interactions, and that's what you were talking about, the fact that going back to classic marketing, trying to get your message, your brand, your products across the customer for brand awareness. And that's what we do with gamification. Like it's a way to put like a customer, to put like products in front of the audience, and the audience can interact with it. So it's no longer like hidden in a browser, like a cookie or something like that.
Right. No, but that's exactly right. The more you can get people to engage in techniques like gamification that can get them to enjoy and learn more about a brand, that's going to lead to not just more sales, but
Loyalty.
and word of mouth, which is the most valuable type of marketing, because
Yeah.
then it's not just one-to-one with sales. It's I tell someone, or I tell 5 people, and each of them tells 5 people. And then before you know it, you've got a movement on your hand, which is what all brands really want.
So I think we'll jump in with another game of quickfire questions if you're ready. So this one is called Oreo or Orino.
Okay. Oreo or Orino?
So it's basically hot or not, but with the cookie theme. It was also potentially going to be called Maca-ruin or Maca-ruin, but anyway.
I got to write that one down. Macaroon
or Maca-ruin. I wasn't sure if that's something, if macaroons were across the pond, but anyway. So are these big business moves exhibiting genius level IQ, or are they swings and a miss? So number one, at the Apple iOS update that Facebook hates and third-party cookies going away. I feel like you've already expressed that you think this is a genius level IQ.
That's definitely genius. That's definitely a macaroon, without a doubt. Maybe adult macaroons.
We're going
very good. Yeah, we'll go with macaroon and macaroon. I like that one.
Okay, awesome, cool. It's easier to say. Oreo or Orino looks good written down, but you try and say it and it sticks in the throat. Yeah. Elon Musk, number 2. Elon Musk buying Twitter and changing its name to X.
I think, I would never bet against Elon Musk ever. And I got a Tesla 2 years ago, and best car I've ever owned. And the other day I wanted to look at the car, and I went into the app because you can see the car live parked in a parking lot. And it was the first time I've gone to that section of the app in like a year. And I noticed there's a button down there that says fart. And you press the button and the car makes very loud farting sound outside. And then right next to it is a microphone, and you press it and it changes your voice. It sounds like very official. And I'm like, anyone that puts a fart button and can make your car fart, I'm betting on that person. I mean, that's just genius right there to me. So, I mean, definitely macaroon to him. Now, a lot of people are saying, he's crazy that he did that. I think it's very, I always say, let's wait until we're all the way through. I think we're in the middle of a process here. What I do know is that Twitter was in pretty bad shape when he bought it. It was far away from making money. I think he's still far away, but I think he's a little bit closer than they were. So let's see where it ends up. But I would not bet against this man. Definitely not.
I can't wait to see Twitter fart as well.
Yeah.
Well, it's not going to happen now. But if it had happened, would you have bet against Elon Musk if he did find Mark Zuckerberg?
I would definitely. I mean, listen, they always say in like a boxing match, it's all about the size, and the reach of someone. I mean, Elon is.
But is it not an MMA fight though? So surely Zuck's groundwork's going to come into play. I don't know. I'm betting against him if that happens, dude.
Yeah, I mean, Elon said he needed time to get into shape, so I would still bet for him. I would definitely bet against Zuckerberg in that, without a doubt.
Coming to Jeff for the hot takes today. Cool. So, last one. I think I know what you're going to say for this. The big billionaires investing in space tourism.
I think that's an interesting one. I think space tourism, it may end up going the route of the, what was that submarine that had the issue?
For the Titanic. Yeah.
I think space is best viewed from afar. I think getting close to space is not that great. From what I hear, it's not good if you're outside the ship. So and if you notice, the ones that are actually moving forward are the ones who are using it for commerce and things like that. I mean, Elon Musk company with the reusable rockets. I mean, it's in fact, I think speaking to Elon again, I don't think anyone else has created reusable rockets or anything like that. So it's pretty interesting, but it is amazing to me when people have billions of dollars of things they put their money into. It's kind of
When you get to
fascinating.
that point, it's time to leave a legacy, I guess. But yeah, I can't predict any of your answers. I think you're going to say one thing and you're going another way. I'm really enjoying it. So we've
Good.
just got some closing questions for you now, Jeff. So, looking back on your career, what would you pinpoint as being your biggest achievement and why?
My biggest achievement, I'd have to say my biggest achievement was when I was 20 and I was working at a restaurant in California as a magician.
What?
We didn't have time to go over all that. That'll be on the next one. And my biggest achievement was I did this card trick for this young woman and I had to write her name and phone number on it. And that night I called her and that was 30 some odd years ago. And that's my wife today. So that was my biggest career achievement. Best trick
Well
ever.
done.
Yeah. So it's like everything else from there is downhill. So that was the best trick ever. So
I'm blown away. That was unreal. Okay, number two. What was your biggest misstep and how would you tackle it differently knowing what you know now?
I've learned as I've gotten older, there's a time to exit. And if you overstay your welcome, you're gonna suffer as a result of it. So if you look at Seinfeld, the TV show Seinfeld.
I am very well versed in Seinfeld, so
Yeah.
continue.
So so Seinfeld, he ended at the height. And he people said he should have kept going. But what ended up happening as a result, because he left when he did, the legacy still lives on. It's still in syndication. It still does very, very well. So when to exit is really, really important. The end result of that for me is that when I exited C3 and then I went on and did a couple of things and I wanted to start up again in this space, it had been so long for me. It had been over 12 years since I had started up a company from scratch. And even though I had done it, when I had exited, I was using different muscles at the end of my career there. And now I had to go back to the beginning and I started doubting myself. And that was a big thing because I hadn't used those muscles in so long. And luckily my wife was like, listen, you've done this before. It's going to come. It's like riding a bicycle, but it didn't feel like that in the beginning. So I think trying as you get older, one of the things you realize is you learn what you're good at, what you're not good at, and you want to focus on the things you're really, really good at. I like creating things. I like starting things up. That's where my skill set is, scaling up to a certain point. And then it's time for me to get out of the way at that point.
Huh. So when's it time for you to get out of the way of Provolytics then? You kind of invited that
All right.
question.
Yeah, no, that not anytime soon, but I can see it on the horizon because there's other things that I want to do as well. There's other interests that I have. And that was one of the other things with C3 is that it was a younger version of myself where I was all in 24/7. And that wasn't a healthy way to be. So I think having a business, focusing in on it primarily, but also giving time for yourself to do other things and other interests, I think is important.
Okay. Awesome. So, I mean, that was pretty good, but final question, finally, what's the single best piece of business advice you've ever been given? And is it still the best business advice or could you improve upon it?
The best business advice that was given to me wasn't given to me as business advice. It was given to me by one of my lawyers. Everyone has a bad feeling about lawyers. And it really wasn't, really didn't give me advice. We just had a bunch of conversations probably 15 years ago about his exercise schedule. And he was, considerably older than me. And I was just like, wow, you know, he's in great shape. He looks really young for his age. And that, that to me kind of put me down the path of saying, you know, you really have to take good care of yourself, because if you don't, what is all of this about? You know, most folks that are running startups are killing themselves so that, oh, when I get to this point, then I'll do this. But what ends up happening is that if you don't take care of yourself, you're never going to make it to that point. And that's not a good thing. So
Where is that point as well? Because
yeah, exactly.
whenever you reach a point, you've got another one coming up.
Yeah, there's always more. So I would say the best business advice is to take care of yourself. And if there's something that you're going to do when you get to whatever point it is, try to do as much of it as you can today, because you may not get there, you know, and make sure every day is enjoyable, and you have a good time. If you're not enjoying yourself, then it really sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, because otherwise, why are we doing this?
You've,
You gotta have fun.
yeah, you know what? This has been an absolute blast, Jeff. Like, thanks so much for sharing your time and your, I'm going to call it wisdom with us as well.
Oh.
Like, thanks a lot. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you're going to start up next.
Me too. It'll be a lot of fun. I guarantee it'll definitely be fun. Because
I believe
if
it.
it's not fun, I'm not doing it.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
Good.
so if people want to learn more about Provalytics and yourself, where can they reach you?
Well, then go to provalytics.com. They can also find me on LinkedIn. I'll also mention just briefly, there's all these changes that are going on in the industry. We spent several months putting together an attribution certification program for free, no cost. You go through it in about 45 minutes. It actually goes through like the history of the industry, where we're at, where we think things are going. You can get to it at attributioncertified.com, or you can go to the Provalytics website. There's a link there as well. You go through it, you get a certificate for LinkedIn. Again, you enroll for free. It's kind of our gift to the industry to help marketers get over this next hump. So I would definitely recommend that for anyone. And please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I always love to talk to other business owners. You know, I learn more from folks than they learn from me. That's always what I feel like. So I'm always open to talking to anyone.
Amazing. And we'll stick a link to that down in the show notes as well. Cool.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome.
It's been great meeting you guys. Definitely had a blast.
Streamify.